Jim is the president and CEO of a successful consulting business here in Winona. He has spent the last 17 years building a life in this area and lives just outside of Winona with his wife and 2 young daughters. But in the latter half of 1971 and most of 1972, Jim was a warrant officer helicopter pilot flying in Vietnam for the United States Army. Jim flew with A Troop 7, 17th Air Cavalry, and the 129th Assault Helicopter Company. He has flown over 1,500 combat missions in Vietnam and was shot down on 3 of those missions. He has earned the Vietnam Service Medal, 3 Bronze Stars, Vietnam Campaign Medal with 60 device, and qualified for over 30 combat air medals, including one with V device for valor. As many of you Vietnam veterans know, every soldier in Vietnam got a 7-day R&R during their tour in country. Jim made the choice to use his only R&R to escort the remains of his roommate, First Lieutenant Thomas Francis Shaw, back to his family in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce Mr. Jim Crigler.
Thank you for that very warm welcome on this sort of blustery day. Ladies and gentlemen, the toughest duty that I had in Vietnam was not flying into a hot LZ and facing the North Vietnamese. It was escorting my roommates, my good friend, my fellow pilot Tom Shaw's body back to his family in Wisconsin. But that wasn't nearly as tough as it was for the Shaw family and the 58,000 families like them. Their sacrifice was immense and has left wounds that are not healed to this day. Last year, in May of last year, I had one of the honors of my life to be reunited with the Shaw family, a family that I had not seen since I presented a neatly folded American flag to them from a grateful nation. 40 years, May of 1972. And I'm really honored to tell you that in our audience today is one of the family members of Tom Shaw. David Shaw and his wife Magali, Tom's younger brother, are here. And David, I want to say to you, and I think the community members will support me in this, that I'm as thankful for your family's service, sacrifices, and the other families like yours as I am for the men that I'll be talking about here today. And may God bless you and your family. As Sam Sasser will tell you, I was truly honored to be asked to be up here and speak to you today, but the truth be told, I was also reluctant to accept his invitation. In fact, it took his wife Joni asking me, and I think Sam called me 2 or 3 times to get me up here. You see, as it would be for any combat veteran, this is a very emotional topic for me. And like most Vietnam veterans, well, I tried to put the war deep back in the recesses of my memory. After Vietnam, I just wanted to get on with my life and look forward and not look backwards. But I think Sam persisted because he knew that I flew with men that gave the ultimate sacrifice. And he also knows that we're here because of those sacrifices. You and me, all of us as Americans, we're free. We're free men and free women. And although this is a cliche that's used many, many times, I believe it's very true. Freedom, ladies and gentlemen, is not free. As you drive down Lake Park, you're going to come to the Vietnam Memorial, and there are 2 panels on that memorial that face the street. On the left is a Huey helicopter, and every Vietnam veteran knows the sound of those blades slapping the air. Below that, there are the years 1958 through 1975. 17 years of war. 17 years. That's why on the right-hand panel, there's a very exhausted soldier. The war was very different in 1958 than it was in 1968. or even when I was there in 1971 and 72. But for the men that I flew with in Vietnam, our experiences were as harrowing as any war could be. In 1971 and 72, our country was a mess. We were in a turmoil, and Vietnam had severely divided us as a nation. We would elect a president, Richard Nixon, on his promise to end the war. I think his famous phrase was peace with honor. So when my flight school buddies and I got to Vietnam, we were in the midst of a massive withdrawal. Washington and the Nixon administration now had a policy of Vietnamization, or turning the war over to the Vietnamese to fight themselves. At the peak of the war, in 1968 and 1969, there were over 500,000 troops there, 550,000 U.S. soldiers. But by March of 1972, when I was there were less than 55,000, and only 6,000 of those were actual combat troops. And those troops would not be used offensively because Washington wanted to minimize the American casualties. So the men that I flew with supported the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the ARVNs, and believe me, they were tired of their war. We also supported 2 divisions of Korean Army, the Tiger Division and the White Horse Division, as well as any U.S. advisors that were in our area of operation. So there we were, supporting mostly Allied armies with a deep anti-war sentiment at home during a time of withdrawal. And ladies and gentlemen, the North Vietnamese did notice. In late March of 1972, they sent 12 divisions of fighting men to fight us during our U.S. withdrawal. That's about 180,000 troops at full strength, with hundreds of tank support, and they also had new Russian-supplied Strela shoulder-fired heat-seeking missiles. Believe me, if you were a helicopter pilot and you flew above treetop level, you took your life in your own hands. Our local commanders called it the Battle for Kon Tum and An Khe Pass. The press called it the Spring Offensive and later changed it to the Easter Offensive. The North Vietnamese called it the Nguyen Way Offensive. But the helicopter pilots and crew members, we just called it hell. I'm not going to go into the many battles that we fought during this time, and there were many. But I am going to tell you the tremendous courage of these great men. You see, they all had to volunteer for this duty. And most of the gunners and crew chiefs, well, they were draftees. They served without trying to go to Canada to evade the draft or seek college deferments. And right or wrong, they believed that their country needed them. Those men in the back of my Huey were and always will be my heroes. They protected me and my co-pilot and the men that we would fly in to drop off or rescue with their courage and their M60 machine guns. They seemed, ladies and gentlemen, those men seemed brave, beyond brave and fearless. With no protection other than what we called a chicken plate on their chest, they would hang out of those helicopters with those M60s ablazing. And when we would land in an LZ or a compound under heavy attack, it was they, in a matter of seconds, who would organize the loading and unloading of the wounded, or resupply of ammo, food, water, or worse, taking the bodies of our dead soldiers back. And many, many of them died. Men like David Stamper, a young gunner with the 129th Assault Helicopter Company. He was killed in 1972. Davey made the ultimate sacrifice, as did over 58,000 men and women whose names are listed on the Vietnam Wall. There were approximately 2.7 million men and women that served in Vietnam. 40,000 of them were helicopter pilots, and about that same number were crew members. 80,000 men, and they paid a steep price. Plexiglass and thin magnesium and aluminum will not stop an AK-47 bullet. Over 10% of the names on the Vietnam Wall are helicopter pilots and crew members. Vietnam it's my war, and I'm here to memorialize the fallen heroes that I knew in that war, but also of other wars. The forgotten veterans of the Korean War, the war in Iraq, the ongoing war in Afghanistan, World War I, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, but especially World War II. In all these wars and countless other skirmishes, men have died for the cause of our freedom. And just to give you an idea of how many, listen up. In 80 months of the Revolutionary War, there were 10,600 casualties, men wounded, 4,400 deaths, or 55 per month in that war. In 37 months of the Korean War, there were 137,000 casualties, almost 34,000 deaths, or about 900 Americans dying each month. In the 90 major battle months of Vietnam, there were a lot more months in Vietnam, but in the 90 major battle months, there were 211,471 casualties, men wounded, 47,369 deaths, 526 Americans per month killed in that war. But in 48 months, in 4 years of World War II, there were 1,078,000 casualties, wounded, and over 407,000 deaths of U.S. soldiers, 6,639 dying each month of the war. This is a staggering number to me, ladies and gentlemen, and I am humbled by the sacrifices of those men and women. But all these heroes of all these wars chose something. They chose to be faithful, but especially the Vietnam veterans. They chose to reject a fashionable and skepticism of their time. They chose to believe, and they chose to answer the call of duty. In the words of President Ronald Reagan, they seized certainty from the heart of an ambivalent age, and they stood for something. Ladies and gentlemen, they stood for something. They weren't baby killers. I know, because I fought with them. They stood for freedom. The freedom for a guy like me to start a business and move to Winona and make a life for myself. The freedom of speech. The freedom for war protesters to protest while they yet fought the war. The freedom for all of us to vote and to have our vote count. And to elect a president and to impeach a president. To vote him in and to vote him out. When I came back from Vietnam, admittedly, I was very, very bitter. But I was fortunate enough to, at some point, to read the words written by a guy named Joe Galloway. He was a war correspondent with the Grunts in Vietnam, and he was a real hero himself. He was the only civilian in Vietnam to be awarded from the U.S. Army the Bronze Star for bravery in action. His words changed my direction forever. Joe said, "We are the fortunate ones. We survived when so many better men gave up their precious lives for us. And we owe them a sacred debt, a debt to live each day to the fullest and to enjoy those freedoms that they gave their lives for, to be Americans." A sacred debt, ladies and gentlemen. And so it is, on this Memorial Day, that I and you take time from living each day and say thank you to those men and women, and to remember the ultimate sacrifices that were made, sacrifices so that we could have the freedoms that we're enjoying right here today. So from this podium, I say to the souls of the many thousands and thousands of men and women that have sacrificed their lives, but especially to these men that I knew so well, Spec 4 Davy Stamper, Gunner, First Lieutenant Thomas Shaw, Warrant Officer Claude Struthers, Captain Lee Billingsley, who personally saved my life, Warrant Officer Glenn Nowakowski, who was Billingsley's co-pilot and also saved my life. We are forever in your debt, and we thank all of you. And may God always bestow his blessings upon you and your family. Thank you.